You know, Joy, I don't know if there's a majority in the country or in the swing states for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. We're going to find that out. I feel quite certain there's a majority of just on the forced referendum, like, do you want to think more about Donald Trump or less? That there is genuinely a majority in the country. I don't know if that's going to be the votes, but that is part of the pitch here.
Yeah, I mean, there's an eye roll to it at this point, right? His act is getting old, and that line, new generation of leadership, I think that's key, because when you talk to younger people, they're not as partisan, and they're frustrated with the idea that a lot of what we spend time talking about, you know, when they watch us on YouTube, they don't really watch cable news, but wherever they're watching, they're just annoyed about the fact that Democrats and Republicans are constantly fighting each other and not solving their problems, and I think that's really important that she got out. So just now to go back to her disciplined campaign person. Because, yes, this was a much more effluent speech. It was a different kind of Kamala. But then she got back down to business. She said, I'm a new generation of leader. I'm not going to ignore somebody who doesn't agree with me. Even if you didn't vote for me, I'm going to listen to you and listen to all the ideas. Then she got to the stuff that's important, reducing costs. She said Donald Trump is going to do another $1 trillion in tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. He's going to pay for it with a 20% national sales tax. One of Michael, we had Michael Tyler on earlier on my show when you guys were all with me. There's a job the comms director wants her to do. One of them is to get out and get people to understand this national sales tax, his tariff plan. She also says that he is looking to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which will throw tens of millions of Americans off their health insurance. That is a big deal to people who may not be paying a ton of attention, but might be tonight. She's talking about he's delivering tax cuts to billionaire donors. I'll deliver tax cuts to working people and the middle class. She also talked about making sure that working people, that dreamers would get an opportunity. I haven't heard her talk about dreamers. She talked about a pragmatic approach to immigration. So when she starts going through and ticking off the things that she would do, she talked about making it so that people could finally afford their first home and ending price gouging on groceries. I noted that because that is one of the big beefs that people who are open to Trump have, is how much things cost. So she got right to the idea that this new generation of ideas can help make your life affordable, and particularly for millennial voters and Trump open sort of Gen Zers, that is their big issue, the cost of things.
And there's that sort of substantive policy part of the speech. I want to talk about one other agenda in there in just a second. But this has been the message on the paid advertising. Like, that is the stuff they are hammering day in, day out. If you watch American football games, as I do, you get a lot of that from both the super PAC associated with and the Kamala Harris campaign as well. But also, I thought, Rachel, this idea of sort of democratic debate and disagreement, that, like, we're going to not agree, people are going to vote for me or not vote for me, I'm going to be everyone's president. And this line about, she had in slide number 3 here, we're talking about the enemies list. And she kept talking about, like, that's not, like, I want people to say different things. I understand that we're a fractious country, that people don't all agree, but I'm not going to have an enemies list. Take a listen.
So look, in less than 90 days, either Donald Trump or I will be in the Oval Office. Okay? On day one, and on day one, if elected, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list, full of priorities of what I will get done for the American people.
This is a theme, Rachel, just like he's thinking about himself and he wants vengeance, and I'm thinking about you, and I'm going to try to actually do stuff. And that really is that's where the kind of the substance and the policy and the character stuff come together, and this is the core argument.
Yeah, and politicians, good politicians, always make time during their campaign to say, I will work for you even if you don't vote for me. I'll be the senator for all of Pennsylvania, or I'll be a president for all Americans. They always do some version of that. But in this environment, with Trump saying we have an enemy within against whom we need to use not just physical force, but U.S. military force, right? I mean, there's a Republican candidate for schools chief in North Carolina right now who's a super Trumpy schools chief Republican candidate, and she says that what she wants is publicized, televised executions of people like Barack Obama, right? Like this is the vibe that's coming from MAGA world, including their elected officials and their candidates for the highest offices. And so in that kind of environment, you can't just say, I'm going to be a president for everyone. Like, it's not enough. And so Vice President Harris tonight said, I don't relish a country where we don't have debate, where we don't have arguments. We want arguments. We want debates. We believe, and I believe, that when people disagree about things and we can fairly work it out amongst ourselves, and we can each hear it, we can hear all sides of things. We can disagree vigorously. We'll come up with better policies. And not only will I listen to you, but I will not lock you up. And I would like you to have a seat at the table. And I mean, it's actually, I got to say, I bristle at it a little bit. I just think, like, do you want people to have a seat at the table who are going to use their seat at the table to dismantle American democracy and install a dictatorship that never leaves? I don't know if they get a seat at the table, but she's saying they will, and that is a Gerald Ford's pardon kind of message. That is a let's end this division kind of message. That is a it's not an us and them America kind of message. And I think it's maybe she's got smarter, better angels than I do, but that is a very moderate, responsible, big-hearted message that I think is probably a good strategic choice.
Yes, and moderation in tone and approach is a key theme here, and it's reflected by the fact that polling has shown people assess her as more liberal than she sort of actually is, right? It has a lot to do with her gender and her race, and people sort of the framework through which people view that. There's the one more policy thing I just want to hit, because I think it's probably the most, in some ways, revolutionary seismic policy proposal of the campaign. It's not gotten as much attention as probably deserved, but she talked about the idea of Medicare paying for home care for elder folks. This is something that I just think tens of millions, if not more, Americans are dealing with in some way or the other. And it really would completely transform, revolutionize the way that people can conceive of care, the idea of like drawing down your savings so you can get onto Medicaid, which people do all the time, which is just a central financial challenge people face. Here she is talking about this home care agenda, slide number 5, about Medicare paying for that. Take a listen.
Currently, if you need home care and you don't have some money to hire someone, you and your family need to deplete your savings to qualify for help. That's just not right. So we're going to change the approach and allow Medicare to cover the cost of home care so seniors can get the help and care they need in their own homes. Now, Donald Trump has a different approach. He tried to cut Medicare and Social Security every year he was president. Look, I believe that when people have worked hard their entire life, they deserve to retire with the benefits they have earned.
So, the way this works now, home care is through Medicaid, which is a means-tested program, right? Originally designed for folks in poverty. What you have to do is become poor to get the Medicaid money. I mean, that's literally the incentive structure when she says deplete savings. It's not a universal social insurance program like Medicare and Social Security. This would be transformative on that score, and is wildly popular in the polling I've seen, Joy.
Yeah, and look, I have 2 friends that are going through this right now, and we know a lot of people. And look, if you look at her poll, if you look at that latest ABC poll, for instance, it breaks down the way that she's performing, including in swing states and nationally, and you break it down by age. The generation she's performing the weakest with is my generation, Generation X. And so this is a message that is directed right at Generation X, who are a large part of the sandwich generation, and as well as older millennials who are now getting into that generation as well. If you are in your 50s, at this point, or late 40s, you might be caring both for children and still supporting children who, let's say, are in college, who you're still supporting financially, but also supporting an elder or dealing with elder care. It's incredibly expensive. Or if you have an injured family member that needs to go onto Medicaid, it the system is not designed for you. And it's so expensive that it's breaking people financially. And so I think this is an important sort of, as you said, it doesn't get as much attention, but it goes right to the amygdala of people for whom cost is the thing that's making them undecided, for whom the spending and the pressure on them, particularly after COVID, which made even work harder and more difficult to obtain, that's who she's talking to, because I think what she's understanding is a lot of the undecided are financial voters. They're voters who vote based on how much things cost them and who they assess as better for their pockets. And in this sense, she's saying if you are in that sandwich generation, if you are Gen X or an older millennial, I'm the one who's going to make things costless and make it possible for you to be able to afford both elder care and child care.
All right. Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow, both of whom have pulled overtime tonight, and I am incredibly appreciative and grateful for you pulling overtime with me. It's a great joy to do that. Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thanks.